Hi there, and welcome back to our emotional regulation class. I am your host, Tom, and today we're going to talk a little bit about mindfulness. Now, we've done quite a bit of the series with this in our coping skills class, so I'm going to put some links down below that will take you to some mindfulness techniques that you can use for living in the moment and some strategies on how to do that. So with mindfulness, we want to try and get you closer to living in this moment now. A lot of times when we're emotionally dysregulated, unless it just happened, that stressor is now in the past. And so where a lot of the stress comes from is that playing over and over and over. And sometimes it gets even more and more intense. It's a massive snowball that going downhill in our mind. And so we have this thing that we can sometimes make a mountain out of a molehill, or we catastrophize this. So what we want to do is we want to try and focus on the now, and we want to try and do that without judgment. And that's judgment of yourself. So if you're blaming yourself, or if you are judging others for what's happened in that scenario, or for the situation itself. Okay. So one of the ways that we can do that is called radical acceptance. And this sounds like a really simple concept, but it is exceptionally hard to try and master. And part of that is we want to judge. We want to judge because that's how we, because humans are very judgmental, and so what we need to try and do is accept things as they are, not for what our opinion of it is or what we're thinking it is, but what it actually is. And so what radical acceptance does is that you have to accept it, mind, body, and soul, is in terms of what's actually happened. And that can be really hard, especially if it's a very intense thing. So if there was a death in the family, um, and you don't want to accept that they're gone, or you don't want to accept how they went. It could have been an accident, it could be cancer, it can be, and there's this pain and resentment and all these things, and it's not fair. Um, and by accepting that they're gone, regardless of circumstances, regardless of how you feel about it, accepting it for what it is, that they are gone and they are not coming back, um, is hard, but it's going to be necessary for you to move forward. And so you need to stop fighting the reality, and let go of the bitterness. And that can be very hard to do because sometimes we want to be angry, right? We want something to change. We want something different. And that's unfortunately not going to happen in a case like that. And so the sooner that we can kind of accept what it is, um, the quicker we can heal. So why should we accept reality? It's like, because sometimes reality sucks, right? Like our situations can be feeling awful and it's horrible, and why would we want to go through that? Because rejecting reality doesn't mean we get to change it, right? So just because we think something else should have happened doesn't change what's happening now. And that's really hard. Um, your pain cannot be avoided, and by rejecting reality, it turns pain into suffering. And so by not accepting reality, your pain will actually, in many cases, get worse. And so, what you want to do, um, is you want to accept it. And one of the phrases that Linehan uses is, "The path out of hell is through misery," and that was based off of a Buddhist concept, is that you have to go through it. Like the only way through hell is through to walk right through it. Because if you try to avoid it, you're just going to stay there. And so this is a very hard step for people when they're, whether it's a breakup, whether it's a death in the family, whether it's a major accident or a major catastrophe at work, or you lost your job, or, these are really hard things to accept because we don't want those realities. but accepting it will help you to process it. So, so how do we practice this? Because sometimes we don't really want to do this. Um, Sometimes just observing, and just noticing our thoughts and our actions and what is actually happening. So you can remind yourself that the unpleasant reality is just as it is, and it can't be changed at this moment. So we have the mindfulness techniques. We said that, we mentioned before about a previous class that we can do about mindfulness techniques and practicing the opposite action. So what would things look like if you did accept the reality? Like, what would be different than what it is now? So another piece would be another observation piece of noticing body sensations. Are you tense? Are you shaking? Are you trembling? Are you crying? What is it that you're doing as you think about accepting, this reality? So one of the things that's one of the hardest things, especially with grief. So if somebody's passed away, is allowing yourself to actually feel that, because again, these are not pleasant sensations, and we don't want the person to be gone, or we don't want the person to be sick, or we don't want, but that's not the reality. And so we have to allow ourselves the opportunity to grieve, the opportunity to feel sad or angry, um, in order for us to process it. So the one thing that is important though is, to make sure that we know that life can be worth living even if there's pain in it. Because there's going to be several times in our lives where pain is inevitable, and that we will experience it. Every human will experience pain in their lifetime, given the length of time. So what you want to do is you want to, again, kind of go through it, not around it. And that will, even though that may seem counterproductive for you, it will help with your healing. So your homework today, or for this week, or for the next 7 days, is I want you to practice radical acceptance of something. Was there something that happened this week or recently where you're not in agreement with, and you're not happy about, and you don't have to be. That's the good thing about radical acceptance, is you do not have to be, you don't have to like it. You just have to accept that that's the reality at this moment. And we'll talk a little bit more about, okay, what happens um, when I do have some control over something. And so in a previous session we talked about goal setting. And so if you're at this point and we're like, well, actually there are some things I have some control over, you can go back to the goal setting stage and work through that. So that's your thing. I want you to try and do one piece this week where you are looking at radically accepting something that you did not like. Okay? All right. Well, good luck with the assignment, and we'll see you next session.